Welcome to TCA Radio with Clint Hackney. I'm your host, Brian Hadley. The name Charlie Wilson is synonymous with freedom, patriotism, America, God Bless the USA, movies like The Namesake, Charlie Wilson's War, and so much more. Clint Hackney served as a Texas House rep for many years. He actually served the Houston area in the Texas legislature for many years in the 1980s. But he first cut his teeth in politics with the late, great Charlie Wilson, a dear friend of Clint's for a long time before his passing. Clint, we're here to talk about it all today. But first off, going back some, what did you do during the big freeze of 2020?
Well, Brian, not much really, because you couldn't get out. And in fact, the freeze isn't over yet. So, and I'll tell you the one thing, I watched a lot of TV, of course, and one thing is I could relax. And when you get to be as old as I am, you're looking for good places to relax. And I've really gotten into the Ukraine war, the Ukraine and Russia. And while I was watching TV during the big freeze, I couldn't help but have some nostalgia about Charlie Wilson. And I've talked to you about Charlie Wilson before. Charlie was a big deal in my life. He lived in my dad's neighborhood, and it was my dad that introduced me to him as a manager of the lumber yard down in Diboll. And little did I know, I did get the job, and I was in high school still, but I didn't know what a state senator was, and I found out. And I found out what a senator was, but I didn't know what things like Democratic Party and other party and everything. I didn't know much about what he was really doing. He was playing politics all the time. But real soon really, that I found out what was going on, and I learned a lot. What happened first is the elder George Bush was running for the U.S. Senate when I first started working here this lady that was the mother of two of my friends, and she wanted us to pass out. She asked us to pass out literature for the Bush guy, and we did. On a Saturday afternoon, we were just looking for something to do. Say yes, ma'am. So we did that, and the next Monday, what's that guy's name? His name was Bubba Jones. Bubba Jones. He found me. He's a worker at the lumberyard, and he said that Charlie wanted to see me in his office. And so I went up there straight to him, and Charlie told me to sit down. Of course, I did that because he's the boss, and made the mistake of he said to me, the first thing he said to me when I got in there, said, "I heard you were out there helping this Bush buddy, where'd you get that from?" And I said, "Oh, well, we're having fun, and he said, well, you're going to have to stay with me today." And by golly, for 2 hours, maybe it's less than 2 hours, but it seemed like 2 hours, he sat me down in his office, and he told me what Democrats were and how Republicans were what they were like, and he was, of course, leaning with his Democrats. And voila, I became a Democrat. And wasn't too long that I was in college at Texas A&M, and my freshman year, I got a call from Charlie, and that was in the early part of the year, and he told me, he said, Clint, I'm running for United States Congress. I want to be a congressman. He wanted me to be the boss, basically, of 6 counties that were around A&M, so I didn't have to come home all the time. And I said okay, but he had some people helping me and that knew what they were doing. But I'll tell you what, I worked hard and he did too, and we won. After that, I didn't see him much. I was at A&M, and then I spent time in Austin and Houston, and he's in Washington D.C. But you know what? We stayed intact. I mean, we were talking to each other a lot, and I kept up with everything he did. And after he got focused on foreign affairs and military.
Clint, that's a great retelling of everything. Talk about Charlie's crown jewel. What was his crown jewel in politics?
There's no doubt his crown jewel was his leadership during the Afghan-Russian wars and the movie, Charlie Wilson's War. And finally, he came back home to Lufkin. And by that time, I was coming into Lufkin from Houston mainly. So we were both, I was getting time to see him. The last 3 or 4 years that he was still with us, every time I got into town, I'd look him up, and he'd always let me come by, and we'd have good talks. And the thing that
he had a real interesting plaque.
He did.
Didn't he?
You know about the plaque? I've told you about the plaque. And, yeah, and I think it's worth talking about. Just let you know what it is. He had on his fireplace. He had a large stone on top of it, and leaning on a stone was a plaque. And what I'm telling you, the memory that I'm talking about here for me and you and all of us, he inscribed this for us. And you couldn't get out, by the way, you couldn't get out the front door without going by that plaque. So
wow.
Every time you hit the front door,
wow.
You'd read that thing. And it said, "My spirit will go to Afghanistan, though my soul might go to God. But remember my last words to you. Never trust a Russian." And I think he meant it.
What was it like, Clint, working in Charlie Wilson's office or campaign office? I know there was always a lot of activity. That must have been fascinating.
Yeah, and some of it, we got truth. You got to be truthful here. He got the image of a playboy and drinking out and partying, and some of that was true, mostly when he was in Washington.
Yeah.
He did a little too much, but he knew when to stop. He didn't just keep on and get out of hand. But he got around that. And
he always had his mind on his work too.
He did. He would leave a party if he had business to go, politics to take care of, he was going to do it. And he didn't drink as much as everybody thinks.
Right.
You know,
right.
I mean, once you get seen in Congress drinking, they say, "Oh, he's a drunk."
He's a big drunk. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And he had, as you told me, this is known too, but it's fascinating. He had one nice apartment, didn't he? Had a swimming pool in it. Is that true?
It did have a little swimming pool at the West Gate.
That's awesome. Yeah. What, Clint? Wonderful stories. Talk about your entrance into politics. You did. We talked about that. You wanted to go Republican, but he turned you the other way. Was he angry at all that day, or he was more kind of school teachering you the difference between the two parties and how he wanted you to lean?
No, he didn't really try to tell me. Although I guess I'd have to say that he was fair. yet it was clear that Democrats were better than the Republicans. So, what I learned in that early time from him was more about campaigning, and he got into some issues, and interestingly, he was he talked to me about his issues, or at the time it was his issues of East Texas, and he told me, "Clint, if you ever run for office, you got to be able to shoot. You can't be up against the guns. That's just part of East Texas." And most of my he'd say most of my buddies up in Washington now, they want to put a ban on rifles and stuff like that, and they probably right, but I'm not going to try. I got to represent my people.
So he was literally like, you got to know how to shoot a gun, huh?
Yeah.
Fascinating. Last question, Clint. Great stuff today. What would Charlie say today if he was on the show? What would he say is the most important thing? And since you were in the ledge too, what would he say is the most important thing about being a congressman or a state senator or a state rep? I guess it is representing human beings, huh?
To me, and I think to Charlie, it's knowing the people, knowing them, and talking to them, whether they're against you or for you. It's who you talk to, and you need to talk to as much as you can, and not that's part of the work, is learning who these people are, where do they come from, what do we have, and what ideas do we have alike, and what do we not like with each other. But once you got all these people in enough rooms and enough time, you've got a chance of developing some good legislation and policies.
Folks, thanks for listening to TCA Radio with Clint Hackney. I'm your host, Brian Hadley. Clint, give the listeners a preview of next week's show.
Next week, the main characters are going to be President Andrew Jackson, Congressman Davy Crockett, and lawyer Francis Scott Key. And the principal was a painter named Richard Lawrence.
Wow, all those big characters on next week's show. This is TCA Radio. You can find our TCA radios by clicking on the TCA Radio icon at texcon.org.